Good morning. My name is Tony McDowell, and I would like to welcome everybody to the April 10th, 2025 installment of the Virginia Opioid Abatement Authority's Abatement Academy. So the Abatement Academy is a series of free webinars featuring topics related to abating and mitigating the opioid and substance use crisis across Virginia. Topics focus on best practice abatement efforts being used in communities across the Commonwealth. Our intended audience includes community leaders from cities, counties, and other organizations that are interested in developing strategies for the use of opioid settlement funds. Today's session will be focusing on collegiate recovery programs in Virginia. And before I introduce our speakers, just to review a couple of logistics. All the Abatement Academy sessions are recorded, and so we're recording right now. And the recording itself and then the presentation that our attendees will be giving here in a moment will be added to our website. That usually takes 2 or 3 days to get it added to the website, and you should get an email notifying you that those are available. I'm going to be your moderator today for the webinar, and so if you have any questions or comments, please type them into the Q&A portion of your screen. And then I will ask those questions to our presenters. You can type the questions during the session, or you can wait until the end when there's going to be some planned time for Q&As. All right, so now going into the introduction of today's presenters. Tom Bannard is the Assistant Director for Substance Use and Recovery Support at the Virginia Commonwealth University. An individual who himself is in long-term recovery, Tom is passionate about changing the way we treat substance use and firmly believes we must improve our systems of care by focusing on long-term recovery supports, allowing easier access to treatment and recovery resources, educating and supporting family members, and reducing stigma around substance use. Tom directs Rams in Recovery, the largest collegiate recovery program in Virginia, and he oversees an expansion grant through the Department of Behavioral Health Development Services to expand recovery supports at 9 schools across the Commonwealth. He also is managing funds that were awarded by Opioid Abatement Authority, and I'm sure he'll be speaking to that as well. Our next speaker is Ms. Cora Taylor, who is the Assistant Director of SAVES, which stands for Substance and Violence Education Support at Radford University. She is a certified substance abuse counselor with experience in higher education, community mental health, and substance use treatment. Cora spent her early career working for New River Valley Community Services, providing community case management services in a career choice that impacted every professional decision moving forward for her. She has now been at Radford Recovery since 2020, focusing on building a collegiate recovery community at Radford. Cora is incredibly passionate about substance use prevention and treatment, as well as providing training to raise awareness of adverse childhood experiences and how we build resilient communities. And our third speaker is Ms. Kaitlin Carter, currently serving as the Assistant Director with Hokie Wellness, where she oversees the Virginia Tech Recovery Community and the Roost Living Learning Program. Kaitlin is a passionate recovery ally and advocate, as well as an adult child of addicted loved ones, or ACOA. She first joined the Virginia Tech Recovery Community in 2022, but she's worked in addiction treatment and recovery spaces since 2018. She works with students individually, facilitates recovery meetings, spreads awareness and education to campus and community stakeholders, and helps foster campus partnerships in an effort to normalize recovery on Virginia Tech's campus. Kaitlin also serves her campus and community in roles as a Revive trainer, mental health first aid trainer, and recovery ally training. And so welcome, Tom, Cora, and Kaitlin. Thank you for giving your time to support the Abatement Academy and to spread the good work about collegiate recovery in Virginia. And with that, I'll turn it over to Tom.
Awesome. Thanks, Tony. Yeah, really grateful to be here and talk to you all about kind of our efforts in Virginia to establish a network of collegiate recovery programs. It's been a really meaningful part of my career to work on this, and we're very grateful the the role that OAA has played in supporting students in recovery. I can't think of a better way to use abatement funds than to support the education and the next steps for folks who are in recovery and kind of looking to give back to their communities through their education and what education allows there. So so I'll let Cora, I'm going to share my screen here, and I'll let Cora and Kaitlin introduce themselves. Oh, Tony, I just need to be able to share my screen. There we go. All right. Awesome. And here we go. Right. So I'll turn it over to Cora.
All right. Well, thank you all for being with us today. My name is Cora Taylor, and as Tony shared, I'm the Assistant Director of SAVES at Radford University. I've been at Radford since August of 2020, so I came in right in the middle of COVID. I actually interviewed the week before COVID, so that's how long it took for them to actually get me started. But I always like to tell the story that when I was interviewing for the position, my initial interview, I remember them asking me, why Radford, why now? And I'll be fully transparent. My initial thought was, I don't know, I just am ready for a career change. And then it kind of dawned on me that my brother's addiction started in college. And so then it became, a really passionate drive for me that I realized that college really was a turning point for a lot of people. It was either we're going to go this direction or we're going to go that direction. College students are provided a lot of freedoms that they don't necessarily have at home, and then they're learning how to navigate life without the support of family, or maybe if they'd had family that weren't the best support systems anyways, they're trying to figure out, like, can they break that cycle that they had been in for a really long time. So when I came to Radford, I actually went to school at Radford myself. I grew up in the area, went to Radford, actually got a degree in criminal justice because I wanted to fight the war on drugs. Because when I was in college really is when my brother's addiction came to the forefront, and most of my family's in law enforcement. So that just seemed like the natural path that I wanted to take. And then I got involved in working at Newer Valley Community Services and really kind of shifted my thinking. I guess I can transparently say that the thinking did go from moral failing to people that were living with addiction as a chronic disease. So I really at Radford have become really passionate about the fact that a lot of our students have come from communities that have been deeply impacted by the opioid epidemic, recruiting a lot of students out of Southwest Virginia. We know that. And so as time has gone on, and I'll share a little bit more later in the presentation about like what we're doing at Radford specifically and why that's important to me. So I'll turn it over to Kaitlin.
Thanks so much, Cora. And thanks so much, everybody, for taking time this morning to be with us. I know Tony gave a really beautiful introduction, so I will try to keep my introduction focused on just the meat and potatoes of why I'm here. So as Tony mentioned, I'm Kaitlin Carter. I'm a licensed professional counselor in Virginia, and I'm the assistant director for the recovery community here at Virginia Tech. And I've been in this role since 2022. But before that, worked predominantly in addiction and recovery treatment areas as part of my clinical background. My residency is almost exclusively in outpatient and inpatient substance use treatment services and service provision. And before coming to Tech, I was able to help a community-based agency start up an intensive outpatient program, as well as substance use outpatient and substance use case management services. And so I think part of that experience and just really getting to see what substance use and addiction, and particularly the opioid epidemic, looks like in Southwest Virginia really tugged at my heart. And I knew that I wanted to stay in this area. And as a Hokie alum, I think a lot of Hokie alums are always looking for a way to get back to Virginia Tech, since I never left the area once I saw that a position had opened up with the recovery community. I put my hat in there to see if there was a calling and a way that I could serve young adults on campus. And part of that, where I love that you shared why Radford, on my slide, I also have why and why Virginia Tech. A large part of my college experience here definitely was dictated by my experience as a loved one navigating recovery, navigating the recovery of my parents. And as a student, I actually lost both of my parents as a result of their disease of addiction. My dad ended up passing away my sophomore year of college, and my mom passed away my senior year before I graduated. And while a lot of people in the Hokie community knew a little bit about my story and they knew that my parents had passed away, there really was a lot of shame and a lot of stigma about the household that I grew up in and about my parents' addiction. And so I never really got to share openly and fully kind of what that experience was and some of the nuances that come with the grief process when there's loss related to addiction. And there were not services here when I was a student. And I think at that point in time, young Kaitlin was definitely a little resentful and probably never would have imagined coming back to Virginia Tech. But as I learned about the recovery community being started on campus the year after I graduated, I just was really mesmerized. And when I was in a room with Josh and the original student founder, they were sharing that they just started the recovery community. It was the first time I'd been in a room where we were openly talking about addiction and recovery. And I just really loved the work that they were doing. So I started following their path and how this was growing over the years, and never really imagined I would be a direct part of it, but knew I wanted to figure out how to be a part of it as a local Blacksburgian. So it's been really beautiful to just come back and really live out our motto, which is Ut Prosum, which stands for That I May Serve. And today I am here to really just talk about how grant funding has served Virginia Tech, but we have not received OAA funds in the past. So really just wanting to focus on how utilizing grant funds can legitimize like your existence and awareness of resources on a campus, and how we would actually like to start utilizing OAA funds if given the opportunity to continue the work that we're doing here and to continue just the work of collegiate recovery in the state. So I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Thanks, Kaitlin. Thanks, Cora. Tom Bannard, I am at VCU and have worked with our collegiate recovery program first as a volunteer in 2013 and then as staff since 2015. So it's been very cool to see efforts develop across the state. I got into recovery in 2006 and kind of in between my first senior year of undergraduate and my second senior year of undergraduate. And I was very fortunate that the school that I went back to after I got into recovery was one of about five schools in the whole country that had collegiate recovery support. And so it wasn't much. It was a small group of students, and I was very fortunate to find it. I just happened to be in a class with the professor who started it. So just really lucked into it because it didn't really have much of a presence on campus, but it gave me an instant community when I was going back to school and kind of navigating early recovery, and a lot of the support that was available to me, both in terms of treatment and then the ongoing recovery support was not really available at that time to most people. We still didn't have mental health parity. You could be discriminated against legally for having a substance use disorder when it came to insurance and all of that kind of stuff. So we've come a long way and we've got a lot of work to do, but I love working in the space of collegiate recovery. And, one of the core reasons that we do this. So the plan today is just to walk through some background, some basics of collegiate recovery, and then give Cora and Kaitlin an opportunity to talk about the programs on their campuses and the ways that those programs connect to our larger movements in the state and in our local areas around substance use disorders and recovery support. But at its core, we just have a strong belief that students shouldn't have to choose between their recovery and their education, that, our campuses in general are recovery hostile environments, right? There's a lot of data that says college campuses, substance use is higher the general population. It's higher than non-college peers. And so there's some ways in which college environments kind of support and almost encourage, I wouldn't say our administrations encourage, but I think that the environment encourages substance use, right? And so when students are either trying to get into recovery kind of during a traditional age college experience, or they have active addiction for a period of time and decide, hey, I got get into recovery, I want to go back to school. Historically, these spaces have not been supportive of folks in recovery, and so just that's kind of our core piece, is that these programs allow folks not to have to choose between their recovery and their education. It was a very common thing when I started working in the field 17 years ago, that people said, well, you can't go back to school in recovery, you're just gonna work whatever job, and it's too hard, it's not a good environment, it won't be supportive of your recovery. And there's been so many blessings in my life because I was able to go back to school, and the reality is that when you support folks in these environments, they really thrive, because purpose is a big part of recovery, and people find purpose often through their educational experience. So some just basics that we don't do a very good job with the continuum of care. I'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. Peer support really makes the difference, right? And it's really common for folks navigating early recovery, especially young people. They don't want to be as sick as they often are. They don't want their substance use disorders to be as bad as they often are. And so if we can create a community, if we can create spaces where people are going to hang out, to be around their peers, to be with friends, we can kind of trick them into staying engaged in treatment, right? And we know that the longer people stay engaged in treatment and recovery support, the better their outcomes are, kind of across the board. And so that's, I think, a really important piece of this. And, while our students, so almost across the board, students, more than 90% of students that are engaged in collegiate recovery programs have severe substance use disorder, right? So they're on a kind of extreme end of the spectrum when it comes to substance use. And so, from one perspective, they are high risk, but our students do tremendously well in classes, and they can really contribute to our communities. So we're kind of leveraging this kind of difference, if we think about societally, from somebody who is in active addiction, right? Recurrence of use is really common, especially among young people, and recurrence of problems around use is really common. But if we can keep that person in recovery and we can get them a college education, then that's a whole lot better from a societal perspective, earning potential, those sorts of things, than for that person to kind of stay in active addiction and not have a college education. So just a lot of potential with this population. So you all are maybe familiar with this. This is kind of a typical continuum of care, or an idealized continuum of care, where people kind of get this care over a long period of time. If we can set up, if we do this, we set people up for success, right? In our kind of best models of care, we're providing, up to 5 years of continuing care support. And even after that, we're kind of checking in with people, much in the same way that we would do with other chronic diseases, right? Cancer screenings, you get cancer screenings years and years and years after you're in remission. We should be doing recovery checkups and that sort of thing. And so by providing these kind of supports that are not specific to a certain period of recovery, but are longer term, we're really kind of meeting people's needs from this kind of longer term recovery perspective. So in general, I think our programs work best with folks that have a little bit of recovery, and we can continue to support them in that journey. But certainly our programs also help people initiate their recovery journeys, whether that's at our universities or whether they have to go away to treatment, that sort of thing. We provide that kind of on-ramp to care in collegiate recovery programs. So I'm going to show two slides that I kind of are my kind of core slides of like, why do we do collegiate recovery? So these are from the National Recovery Study. This is a study out of the Recovery Research Institute at Harvard that asked a representative sample of Americans, did you once have a problem with drugs or alcohol, and do you no longer have that issue, right? And then they ask all sorts of follow-up questions about their quality of life, their happiness, recovery capital, which is a measure of resources for recovery, psychological distress, which is fairly obvious there, and self-esteem. And unsurprisingly, the longer people have been in recovery, the better their lives get, right? The lower their psychological distress, the higher their quality of life. But one of the things that really stands out about this study is one of their findings was it's in here about 14 years where people's average quality of life is equal to that of the general population, right? So if we think about this group of folks with substance use disorders, we're not nearly good enough at helping them kind of achieve really high quality of life after their kind of bout with addiction. And one of the things that's always stood out about that is that that's actually contrasts pretty directly with experiences that I've had with students and friends and other folks in recovery that have achieved really good quality of life relatively quickly in their recovery. And so this kind of has always sparked some thought for me. The other thing that's really important about this study is that this is a best fit curve of these data points. And if you only look at the first 2 years, the curve doesn't fit. And there's a break in the curve where people actually experience lower quality of life, lower self-esteem, lower happiness, higher psychological distress in this 6-month to a year period, right? So this really critical period of early recovery is really hard for people, or we say in our community, early recovery can really suck, right? It can be really hard to navigate early recovery. And whether it's recovery community organizations or collegiate recovery programs, this is a perfect place for kind of these less formal peer support interventions, right? Because again, a lot of our treatment is being withdrawn at 3 months or 6 months. If you're really lucky, right, you might go to an IOP, it's 3 months. You might go to residential treatment, it might be a month. You're getting a lot less support kind of 6 months to a year. And yet people are actually struggling. And this kind of aligns with what we know about the neuroscience of addiction. And this is a tough period of time. So if we can get people into this kind of peer-based support, we're really setting them up to thrive. So this is my kind of, the case for collegiate recovery is that it really meets this need during this critical time. And I really consider the first 5 years of recovery, early recovery, that this is a period that's a really kind of mission critical time. And the vast majority of students involved in collegiate recovery programs are in this first kind of 5 years of their recovery. So in terms of our larger student population, there's a substantial number who have overdosed. Most have strong family history of substance use disorders. Most have past criminal justice system involvement and academic disruptions, like really common things. And in fact, this is the data from our national study. If you look at the Virginia data, the students in our collegiate recovery programs have an even higher kind of overdose history and a little bit higher from a criminal justice involvement history as well. So again, these are not kind of, these are higher risk students. We serve a lot of older students in addition to serving kind of more traditional aged undergraduate students. And what do they say about it? So they say that collegiate recovery programs help them maintain recovery academically, to a lesser extent play a role in social life, but a significant amount of folks. And this kind of piece around interpersonal growth. So we kind of think about this as stage 2 recovery issues. It's like, okay, I'm in recovery now. What do I do with my life, right? And I think that these spaces really help people kind of make those next steps in their journeys as human beings and also as professionals. And we'll talk more about kind of our students, and they're very likely to go and work in the field of substance use disorders. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Kaitlin and have her talk a little bit about the program at Virginia Tech and kind of what that looks like. And yeah.
Thanks so much, Tom. So I know I shared I joined the recovery community here in 2022. And when I joined the recovery community, it was definitely in a state of, it was definitely in a lull as far as attendance. Really, it has started to grow extremely quick. And sometimes when things start to grow extremely quick, we are really working day to day to meet the needs day of, and especially when we're navigating that with students in recovery, we really want to be present and in the moment. And when I came in, really, there hadn't been a lot of clear foundation work for thinking through what it looks like to maintain growth with our community while continuing to meet those needs day to day for students, and continuing to ensure the longevity of the community's existence here on campus. So when I came in, that was really on the front of my mind. I knew I wanted to come in and help create something that even after I am no longer in this role one day, it could be passed on in a very intentional and loving way with clear parameters and expectations to continue serving students. Because ultimately, when we don't have that in the forefront of our mind, there is going to be a group of students who suffer from that, right? And so when I was thinking about what I wanted to talk to you all on, I really found 5 different areas that felt most important, primarily because those are the 5 areas that I feel grant funding has helped us to grow immensely in over the last 3 years. And they are areas that we're either looking to continue to expand or to change, just as needs have changed in our community. And so this fall, we were actually able to launch recovery housing on campus. And we had a really beautiful ribbon cutting ceremony. I think that some of the folks that are on the call today actually got to come and attend. So thanks so much for those of you who came to support. But recovery housing was something that I knew coming in was going to be pivotal, and a really amazing resource to add to take our program to the next level as a program, but to also take it to the next level of being able to provide students a level of service that they hadn't been able to get before. So we were able to partner on campus with our Office of Living Learning Programs to create something that could exist on campus right next to our lounge. And the university was amazing. They gave us the hallway right next to our lounge. We have 14 beds that are available for students in recovery. And with the Living Learning Program, we are required to have some form of academic component. So with that, we also got to have conversations about what does it look like to bring scholarship opportunities through a recovery seminar onto our campus. I know Tom is going to talk a lot about recovery seminar. He has done really amazing work with that and expanding that to students across the state of Virginia. And so I will let him speak to kind of a lot of the nuance with that, but we were able to start offering a weekly seminar that our students who live in recovery housing attend, and they get a scholarship at the end of it. So knowing that they're able to dedicate even more intentional time to recovery that week. And also we are able to reduce somewhat of the financial barrier of living on campus. Some of our students who are in recovery have already moved off campus and have to get over that hump of the idea of moving back onto campus, the cost of living on campus, the cost of a meal plan, all of those things. So we really wanted to marry those things together in a way that felt intentional. So this coming year, we'll be moving into our 2nd year of recovery housing. Our 1st year, we ended up having 7 students, and we are actually looking at filling all of our beds, which is not something that I imagined we would be doing in our 2nd year. And so with that, right, the amount of scholarship that we would need to be able to offer to sustain that growth happening that quickly and any other future growth is definitely something that we are thinking about and hoping to continue using grant funding for, since it has supported that program for us this past year. With scholarship opportunities too, I think it's really important, I know Tom already mentioned this, to really be utilizing these funds in ways that are going to go directly to the student. And so thinking about reducing those financial barriers to education, right? So students aren't having to work 3 jobs to support themselves and increase stress and potentially increase risk of returning to use. Thinking about how these funds can go directly to students to support their education is something that is also really important to us here at Virginia Tech. And so we are hoping to secure grant funding to offer some actual full housing and partial housing scholarships to meet that need for our students. We recently were able to add in this past year some part-time employment opportunities, which has been really amazing. It's allowed some of our students to take on different leadership roles and to explore what it looks like to be a leader or be a role model in recovery spaces. And I think that has ultimately really enhanced their recovery, because when you're having to think about how to care for your own recovery while you are caring for others, I think it does create a more intimate relationship with your recovery and some increased awareness of what your needs are. So being able to offer 2 part-time meeting facilitator roles also, right, reduces capacity for full-time staff, so we can continue ideating and continue doing other things to grow the program. But also, so we're providing opportunities for our students who are in recovery to be enhancing their relationship with each other. Ultimately, I don't want our students' recovery to depend solely on their relationship with me and if I'm the one facilitating a meeting. I want them to be able to glean from other folks in recovery. I want them to be able to openly talk with other folks in recovery. And so being able to have those meeting facilitator roles has been beautiful. And then we also have a part-time outreach position, which is responsible for taking out our coffee bike. I'm sure Tom is going to talk a little bit about coffee bike initiatives, but if you have not looked up coffee bikes and the role they play in collegiate recovery, I really encourage you to do so. It's a really beautiful and powerful outreach tool where we can literally use an electric bike and take around free coffee to folks in exchange for conversation about recovery. When I first came here, I did not know how I was going to feel about the coffee bike. I did not know if I felt it was going to be a useful outreach tool, but here's something that I can openly say. I am a lover and a full believer in the power of a coffee bike and the power of a cup of coffee, especially in recovery spaces. More people come up to us or come into our meetings for the first time or send me emails to schedule one-on-ones saying, hey, I actually met you at a coffee bike event, or actually got a free cup of coffee at this thing you were at, and I didn't want to talk there, but I would love to set up a one-on-one because I've been struggling, or because I'm worried about my roommate, or because my mom, is in treatment right now. I need some folks to talk to that get it. None of my other friends get it. And so that coffee bike, I tell you what, I have fallen in love. And so we do offer a part-time position with that to also really be thinking about what does it look like to be teaching our students the importance of sharing recovery in ways that feel comfortable in these open spaces. Overdose prevention. I do not think that we can talk about OAA funding without talking about overdose prevention. And so that is something that I don't work on solely here on my campus. It is not just within the recovery community that we are addressing overdose prevention on campus and in Southwest Virginia and in Blacksburg. I get to partner with our AOD department in Hokie Wellness, which stands for Alcohol and Other Drugs. My counterpart in AOD, Annie Chalmers-Williams, is actually one of the Master Revive trainers in Virginia and has created a beautiful peer leadership team of about 20 different student peers that come on board each year. And their whole goal is health prevention, health promotion, and education, and doing Revive or Narcan, naloxone, opioid reversal trainings. So we have been able to partner with them very intentionally over the last 2 years to think about some exciting programming that we can do on campus. And we're hoping to expand that into the community as well, to really make sure we are equipping as many folks with naloxone as possible, and making sure that we're just reducing that stigma and spreading awareness. One of the big things that we are ideating on right now is how we can make sure folks are comfortable and willing to take naloxone with them when they're going places, right? Because it's a really amazing life-saving tool, but if it's back in your dorm room and not out with you, right, and you're not as likely to need it in your dorm room versus when you're out downtown, how can we create some education and some programming and make it the cool thing to do, to carry your naloxone with you? That is one thing I've learned about working with college students, is we got to think about what the cool thing to do is. And they often teach me new language that I didn't know. And then thinking about how to integrate this onto campus, one thing that we have been able to do is implement one boxes in all of our residence halls. If you're unfamiliar with one boxes, they are just really amazing tools that they're boxes that house Narcan doses and gloves like PPE materials. And they also have a little flip down where a video will share how to respond to an overdose. So they kind of serve similar purpose to AED boxes. And we actually have a one box next to almost every AED box in the residence halls on campus. So that way our students, even if they haven't been through training, even if they don't, have Narcan with them in hand, they at least have access in a residence hall pretty quickly and access to that information on how to use it. So we've been able to support our campus by putting 101 boxes around, and we're looking to grow that to include non-residential spaces as well, places like our library, dining halls, and things of that nature. And especially thinking about legislation that has recently come out about RAs on campus, we call them student leaders, needing to be trained and needing to have access to Narcan. Just thinking about intentional ways we could utilize grant funding to help meet that need and fulfill that mission and reduce fatal overdoses on campus. And then accessible and expanded outreach. I know I already shared about our lovely coffee bike. The one thing with our coffee bike is it does limit some of the type of outreach we're able to do and the folks who can do outreach. Not everybody knows how to ride a bike, and not everybody is comfortable riding our bike. And so thinking through ways that we can make our outreach initiatives accessible. So anybody who wants to spread awareness and wants to spread that education can do so in a way that feels comfortable. While also looking at our capacity to be able to do that. We know that the more we are out, the more visible we are, the more students are going to know that we exist. I have data that shows that students are finding us because of the coffee bike and because of the outreach that we do. And so thinking about ways we can intentionally expand that onto campus, but also into our community, because we do have, the way that Virginia Tech works in Blacksburg is they're married together. And so we want our community members to also feel empowered and equipped to be able to support students with knowledge and awareness. So yeah, all of these are things that grant funding through Tom and through the DBHDS grant have allowed us to already start doing in some capacity on our campus. And because we have been able to do more and really, I don't love this phrase, but I'm going to use it, right? Prove our worth. The beautiful thing that can come out of grant funding is when it's enhancing your visibility and your notoriety, it's legitimizing you on campus as a needed resource. And so we've been able to receive university funding in replacement for things we previously received grant funding for. So for instance, my full-time position, our coordinator's full-time position, it's been able to be adopted under the university budget. And so when we're able to kind of show, hey, this is why this university campus needs this, we've been able to do this with grant funding. The university is able to then take that on, and then we can free up that grant funding for other programs or for other needs to really continue enhancing the services that we're providing and ultimately enhancing the power of recovery in Southwest Virginia as a whole. So yeah, Tom, did I miss anything?
No, you're thorough. Got it for sure. We'll pass it over to Cora to talk about a little bit about Radford.
All right. So just a little background about Radford, and I did kind of leave that out in my introduction, was that part of what attracted me so much to the position at Radford, I wear a lot of different hats. I do advocacy, sexual violence prevention, substance use prevention. But what attracted me most to the position was that Radford had just gotten the grant from DBHDS for the initial start of a collegiate recovery program. And so that was kind of what attracted me. And so what happened is I came in and it was pretty slow the first year, just being transparent. It was COVID. And so we had a kind of a part-time staff position. And that position started and we really weren't making a whole lot of traction. And then that fall for Recovery Month, I brought in my dear friend, Lauren Sisler, and we did a community kind of outreach opportunity. When I say community, Radford's a whole lot smaller than Virginia Tech is. And so I really have to pull in the surrounding communities for us to have really just the support that we need. And so we did that event and I invited Giles and Montgomery and Pulaski and Floyd and Radford. And we did have some, community members there, and we had students that came to that event as well. And that really was what kicked us off at Radford. And so we started to see pretty quick growth after that. We at that point, like, I started to see the need. If I'm being really honest, there was some level of like we were kind of pushing against a wall in the efforts that we were trying to make. But I think that's why relationship building was so important, because as we continued to build relationships and to show the need, like, we got the buy-in that we needed. So just for example, Tom can attest to this. I think the first year that I was there, we wanted to bring the naloxone bike to campus, because Tom also has a naloxone bike. And we wanted to bring it to campus. And I was actually like pitching it to do it during the summer when it's mostly faculty that's there. And I was told no, like, we can't do that. And I was like, oh my gosh, we have a real problem here. I can say that and say total different mindset that we have now, because we also placed 1-boxes in all of our residence halls last year, as well as common spaces across campus. So our library, our rec and wellness center, Deadman, which is where our athletic events take place, and then kind of our like food area. We really wanted them in fraternity and sorority life, and I was kind of told like we can't like make them do that. So real simple, we purchased the boxes with grant funding, and we went to the director of fraternity and sorority life and said, let us get in front of the students and say, like, we will offer Revive training to you, and then we will provide you with a box to have in the house. And they agreed to do that. So we have had several trainings that we've done this year that we've been able to get in front of different fraternities or sororities that they were like, yeah, we can see the need for this. Like, we'd love to have a box in the house, and we're willing to do a Revive training. We are fortunate that Reed, who is our full-time coordinator of peer services, which is a position funded by opioid abatement funding. Reed is a master Revive trainer, as well as Ash, who is our AOD counselor. And we have they do a lot of trainings throughout the year. We've been fortunate over the past couple of years that has been kind of written into the curriculum of nursing, our nursing program. And Radford's got a pretty large nursing program. So they go in every semester and do a Revive training for them, as well as OT, and then several other programs that we've kind of just like developed those relationships with. We also have a part-time peer position with our OAA funding. So I had written the grant for OAA funding 2 years ago. I think we're on our second year, because we as a university were not able to meet the needs of where we were at. And so I was like, hey, what else can we do here? We've used that funding for those positions, as well as Highlander Hope events and retreats. So I shared a little bit. We changed our name. We were Radford's Collegiate Recovery Community. And probably 2 years ago, I really started to see that, like, it wasn't just the students in recovery that needed the support from our office. It really was all of our students that were impacted by the disease of addiction. I shared a little bit earlier that, my brother's battled addiction for a really long time. And I remember what that was like. Like, I remember being a student at Radford University with my Radford University criminal justice sweatshirt on one day, like crying on campus because my brother was really struggling. And so then it became like, I really wanted to be able to support those students as well, not just the students that were in recovery. And what I find is that those students often end up being allies for the students that are in recovery. So it just creates like this beautiful kind of situation that you have there. And so in doing that, like really creating like events and retreats. So part of what we do several events that we go with Kaitlin's group and Tom's group for spring break, or these kids actually really have a lot of fun. And it's really cost effective for them. But we wanted to do something too that was like specific for our students. So for the past couple of years, we have partnered with Are You Able, which is Radford University's adventure-based learning experience. So they have like a ropes course, and they do rafting and they do kayaking and they do caving. Fully transparent, they did that in the fall. I absolutely did not participate. I'm not getting in the cave. But this in a right before finals here in a couple of weeks, like we're taking them to Mountain Lake Lodge. They actually will do equine therapy on the way out. That's something new that we have started doing as well with our students is equine therapy. So they'll do equine therapy on their way out. They'll spend the evening together. They'll get up the next morning, have breakfast. They're going rafting for the day. We'll come back that evening. We'll have a meeting, have dinner together. And then the next morning they'll get up, probably do a hike and kind of wrap up and go back to campus. So it's really just a time for them to kind of like relax right before finals start, and just really be focused on their self-care and well-being. Probably one of the things that I have been most proud of with the funding that we received from the Opioid Abatement Authority were the scholarships that we were able to offer to participants of Eagle's Nest, Regeneration Ministries, or the Well, which are treatment programs in Floyd, Virginia, or one of the 5 recovery courts of the New River Valley. So Giles, Pulaski, Radford, Floyd, and Montgomery. I really, as Kaitlin kind of already touched on, really wanted to be able to let students focus on their education. Because what we know is that for most of the population of individuals that I have worked with in early recovery are not in a financial situation in early recovery to really take that next step. And so then we're trying to focus on education. Some of them, as Tom shared, are non-traditional students. They've got kids and they have other obligations. And so I really wanted them to be able to just focus on their education. The scholarships that we have actually happened simultaneously, and I didn't know it was happening when Radford offered their tuition promise. So several of the students qualify under the tuition promise anyways for free tuition. So the scholarships are really covering cost of living. And we've kind of sat down with some of them honestly and helped them budget, like how can we plan out like what this will look like for them. But one of the things that we're working towards now is establishing that once the funding runs out, that we can continue to offer those scholarships ongoing. So we're planning to host a recovery brunch in the fall to get that kind of established as things continue to progress forward. One of the other things that Tom kind of touched on and that I do not want to bypass is that one of my really major goals and initiatives at Radford has been adverse childhood experiences training on trauma-informed care. And it actually is what I interviewed on when I interviewed for this position at Radford, because I knew that we had a lot of disciplines at Radford that go into the field and do the work. And I felt like the students needed to know the information. And so I have done a lot of those trainings. I saw Kinsey Weavers on this call. Kinsey and I actually did a community training yesterday because part of my work has been joining with the NRV Resiliency Network, which is part of the NRV Recovery ecosystem. And really pushing out those trainings, because what I know in my work is that if we can prevent some of those adverse childhood experiences and we can bring awareness to that, it'll help us have better understanding of how we help people and treat people. And then the last thing that I just want to add to that too is that Tom also spoke about purpose. And for me, that is where it all kind of aligns together. If you haven't read the book, How to Navigate Life by Timothy Klein and Belly Lang, it is a wonderful read that really talks about like the difference between a performance mindset, a passion mindset, and a purpose mindset, and purpose being where it's really at. And I think that in college in particular, we are helping people find purpose. And I think when you find purpose, you find really the path for you, for your life. And I think that that's sustaining. I think that performance and passion are not sustaining, but purpose is sustaining. So I'm grateful to be a part of this community, grateful to have great folks across the state that I get to work with, like Kaitlin and Tom, who have really guided the way for the rest of us, and just thankful for what we can continue to do in collegiate recovery moving forward.
Awesome. Thanks, Cora. And I'm just going to briefly hit on a couple of things but want to make sure there's time for a couple of questions with VCU. But I did want to kind of hit on the core thing that our OAA funding has supported, which is something that's kind of available across the state. So one of the things that we got a large grant from the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Services in the fall of 2019 to help all these schools grow collegiate recovery programs. And these are very in-depth, in-person experiences, right? And then COVID hits right as everybody's hiring their staff. And so we were like, kind of like, how the heck are we going to do this? And one of the things we did was we worked with DBHDS to fund scholarships for not just VCU students, but for students across the state. And the scholarships were tied to a supportive seminar, and there were small scholarships, but they could get them every semester. We had already started that program with VCU students, but because of the statewide grant funding, we were able to serve non-VCU students as well in that program. And so, so that has been really cool because now we do it all hybrid. So we have some students in person, some students virtually, and that program has grown to more than 100 students across the state per semester. And so, so OAA, as the DUHDS funding has gone away, OAA funding has supported that, while we're also raising funds privately to continue that scholarship program. So it's called the Recovery Scholars Program. It's open to any student at a not-for-profit school in Virginia. And it's just been awesome to work with students across the state and community college students, et cetera, because not every school is going to be able to establish their own collegiate recovery program. So those students really deserve some support. So, naloxone was talked about, so I won't talk too much about that. I did want to kind of put a quick plug in for Research to Recovery, which is a conference that we host on campus at VCU about substance use and kind of recovery. And so, so if you're looking for more professional development opportunities, we also post all those videos on YouTube as well from all the talks. And so that's an opportunity to continue to learn more. And it's also a hybrid event, so large in-person presence, but also a large virtual presence as well. The slide I'll leave you with, and then answer some questions, is from our study of collegiate recovery programs. And almost half of the students involved in these programs are either currently working in the field or planning to work in the field of addiction and mental health in the future, right? And so I just think it's such a great way to be thinking about like investing in the future of the field of addiction and recovery is, how can we leverage these students that are deeply purposeful around their connection to recovery and their desire to give back? How do we give them the tools to be able to be successful in that, to make a living, and to really, I just believe our students are going to be the ones that turn the tide of this opioid epidemic. And so that's kind of, my purpose in doing this work is because I know that our students are so well equipped with their lived experience and their education to be the change makers in our communities. So there's our contact info if you want to screenshot it, and I'll turn it back to Tony to see if we have some questions.
Well, thank you guys, all three of you. Fantastic presentation, tons of information. And I hope I can speak on behalf of all of our attendees to say that it's really exciting to see the good work that you're doing on campuses across the Commonwealth. Right now, I don't see any questions in the Q&A, so I would just encourage anyone who's attending, if you have any questions, or even if you just want to share a comment, go ahead and type it into the Q&A. If for any reason you can't type into the Q&A, you actually may be able to raise your hand on your device. And if you raise your hand, I might be able to. I'm not an expert on Zoom, but I did sleep at the Holiday Inn Express last night. So I may be able to allow you to speak if you'll raise your hand, or please just type in questions into the Q&A. Comments, dad jokes, whatever you got. We've got a few minutes. Usually what happens is there's no questions, and then somebody will ask one, and all of a sudden there's 15 questions.
What is the coffee bike? Great. So coffee bike. So we have, it's a cart. And I don't know if I can put this in the chat. Maybe the host can put this in the chat. We have an art professor on our campus that is in recovery and has done a lot of advocacy work around recovery. And he created this bike, I don't know, 10 years ago. And we serve coffee off of it. We serve pour over coffee. So it takes, and we hand grind the beans. So it takes about 5 minutes to make a cup of coffee. And so during that time, we engage with conversation about recovery, substance use, kind of whatever that person wants to talk about. But it really slows people down. It's way better than tabling and giving out a bunch of like crap that's going to get thrown away. It's just a way of kind of engaging with folks about recovery. And now there's about 12. There's 5 in the UK. There's like 7 in Virginia that are on our campuses, and it's just our kind of key outreach.
Okay, so I'm getting some questions now in the Q&A. So real quick, when did the Collegiate Recovery Program movement start? I know, Tom, you kind of mentioned this at the beginning.
Yeah, so it goes back to 1979, I think, was the first program at Brown University. Up until about 2005, 2006, there were only maybe 5 programs across the country. And then since about 2013, there's been a kind of proliferation of programs. There's probably about 200 programs now. And of those, there's probably, about 50 what I would call established programs. So programs that have the amount of robustness of support that Cora and Kaitlin's and our programs have. So there's a lot of really small ones that are struggling to get on their feet. And then there's a smaller group of places where I would send my kid if my kid had addiction. And, I wanted them to have support.
All right, and so we have in the Q&A an anonymous comment that says, "Thank you so much for putting students' health, mental health at the top of your school priority. Hear, hear." And then another comment for an individual looking for more information about the scholarship. And so Tom has shared his email in the Q&A. And
yeah, and I will, if you go, our website.
Sharika from my team has posted some links about the coffee bike. Angela Lopez says, "Just want to say thanks for sharing wonderful information, your personal experiences. She genuinely appreciates hearing from each of you." Okay, well, I think that that pretty much wraps it up. Again, I just want to offer a special thanks to our panelists, Tom, Cora, and Kaitlin. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule. I was a little nervous because Tom is expecting his second, I believe it's your second child, right, Tom? Any minute now. And so we actually moved this session up from when it was originally planned to try to be on the safe side of that. But good luck to you, and thank you all, both panelists and everyone who is attending. We will send out an email once the recording has been and the presentation have both been posted to our website so that you can access those later when you feel like it. All right, thanks again, and thanks for joining the Abatement Academy.